I am uncomfortable sharing certain details about my story, so I will be purposely vague. This story happened back when I was in middle school. Against my wishes, my mom enrolled me into an after-school program called ELP, which stands for Extended Learning Program. I already hated school, and being forced to stay there for an extra hour pissed me off. I would usually get out at 4, but with the program, I was there until 5. I did well in school and I didn't really need the extra time. My only guess is that my parents wanted me out of the house for another hour. My house was a short walk from the school, so I would usually be back by 5:20 at the latest. On the day in question, a huge storm passed through our town during the school day. When 5 o'clock rolled around, there was still an overcast in the sky, which made things darker than usual. As soon as I left the school grounds, I noticed this old station wagon moving slowly down the street toward me. Maybe it was just a confused grandmother of one of the students, unsure of where the drop-off was. I simply ignored it and continued on. It wasn't until I was a block down the road that I realized the vehicle was tailing me. I looked behind me to see something truly terrifying. Behind the wheel of the car was someone wearing a white mask with a creepy-ass smiley face on it. I should have taken off on foot, but instead I just stood there like an idiot as the car approached me. Soon, the wagon came to a stop next to me. I looked directly at the driver's creepy mask before a muffled voice spoke to me.
Hi.
I didn't respond.
Need a ride, kid?
I looked to the ground and shook my head. When I looked back, I was horrified to see that the driver was now pointing a gun at me. I took a few steps back. The driver then squeezed the trigger, and I heard a click.
Bang. You're dead.
The wagon then took off down the street. I stood there in total shock. Some jackass thought it was funny to point a gun at a 14-year-old kid. I ran home and immediately told my parents about what happened to me. The police were called. They ended up arresting the man a couple of hours later outside of a grocery store. Apparently, he suffered from schizophrenia and was off of his meds. The gun he pointed at me was real, but was not loaded. Needless to say, he was locked up indefinitely. The good news is that after that happened, my parents felt really guilty, and I never had to go to that stupid after-school program ever again. This happened back in the late 90s when I was around 9 years old. To give you some background information, I grew up in a cul-de-sac toward the back of my neighborhood. Our school was only a mile down the road. The only crimes I ever heard about was when high school athletes would prank their teammates by covering their cars with toilet paper and Cool Whip. So needless to say, our parents never really worried about our safety. I was sitting in my front yard, waiting for my friend to get home from soccer practice. I suddenly heard a female shriek from somewhere close by. I looked over to see my next-door neighbor Heather running as fast as she could down the street, crying hysterically. She flew past me and into her house before I could even ask her what was going on. I then looked back to where she came from. There was a white car slowly cruising down our street. The vehicle looked severely rusted and beaten down. The kind of thing that wouldn't look out of place in a junkyard. Through the tinted windows, I saw a shadowy figure in the driver's seat. The car's engine revved up as it sped off and disappeared. I didn't see the details of the driver's face. However, I did see that they were looking directly at me as they took off. Even at my young age, I knew a threat when I saw one. Once the initial shock wore off, I ran inside. I don't know why I didn't tell my parents about the incident. I just kept telling myself that it was none of my business. Maybe it was Heather's boyfriend and they got into a fight or something. If she really was in some kind of danger, I would leave it to her to tell someone about it. A few days later, I overheard my mom talking to her friend about a predator that was trying to lure kids into a white van in the subdivision next to ours. I remembered cutting into the conversation and saying, "Mom, do you know if it was really a white car? Because I saw Heather the other day running away from someone in a white car." They completely ignored me, saying that it was rude to interrupt their conversation, and I shouldn't be joking about such a serious thing. I honestly don't remember what happened after this. Again, this was many years ago. To this day, I believe that Heather was only mere seconds away from being kidnapped. I also don't recall if they ever apprehended the suspect. I can only hope that they were never successful. This happened in 2018 in Portland, Oregon. I was 21 years old at the time. Back in those days, I was a night owl who did a fair amount of drinking. I was in downtown Portland one night and decided to stop and grab a quick drink after spending the day with some friends of mine. When I entered the pub, I noticed a very attractive girl sitting at the far end of the bar. She was wearing a hoodie, had a short hairstyle, and a pierced lip. I couldn't help but stare at her like some kind of weirdo. At this time I was still going to college. On campus, I've encountered many attractive girls on a daily basis, but I had never been so stunned like this before. Since we were the only ones at the bar, I felt that my behavior was becoming noticeable. So I made my way to the nearest stool, sat down, and ordered a rum and coke. I thought about striking up a conversation with the girl, but the last time I hit on somebody at a bar, I ended up with a drink on my face, a story for another time. To make a long story short, I didn't have the energy to play 4D chess that night. I'm just gonna have a few drinks, walk back to my dorm, and call it a night.
You look like a deer caught in the headlights.
I looked over, and the girl was now standing next to me. I was shocked. The last thing I ever expected was for her to come over and start talking to me. I had to think quickly. Sorry about that.
There's no need to apologize. It happens all the time.
I bet.
You're funny. Do you mind if I join you?
Please, be my guest. The girl took a seat next to me. So, are you from around here?
Oh, no. Actually, I just arrived in town.
Oh, really? Well, welcome to Portland. It's not as bad as people make it out to be, I promise. I'm David, by the way.
Nice to meet you, David. I'm Sadie.
Sadie and I talked for a while. I found out that she was originally from New York and relocated here to work for a property management company and to escape an abusive relationship. After hearing her story, I offered to buy her a drink, and we continued our talk. After about an hour, I realized that I had drank way too much. Hey, Sadie, I have to get going. It's a long walk back to my place, and I think I'm a bit drunk.
Well, you could always stay at my place. It's not far from here.
Are you sure? I mean, we did just meet. She then leaned toward me and rested her hand on my thigh.
I'm sure.
The thought of scoring with this girl did sober me up. So I paid off my tab, and we left the bar at around 10:30. We then made our way to the small parking lot behind the building.
It's just over there.
Sadie then led me to a green Subaru parked at the far end of the lot. Upon seeing the vehicle and noticing the Vermont plates, I got a bad feeling. Didn't she say she was from New York? I felt like a mouse about to enter an obvious trap, and so I stopped. Sadie? Are you sure about this?
What's wrong, David?
I don't know, got this really bad feeling all of a sudden. I'm not trying to be funny or immature with this next part. I'm simply only relaying what happened. Sadie approached me and caressed my area.
Well, how do you feel now?
The strange feeling I had was quickly chased away and was replaced by something else. Oh, okay then. She walked over to the passenger side door and held it open for me. Before I knew it, I was inside the car of a stranger that I had met an hour ago. After Sadie closed the door, she began to walk around to the other side. But she did so very slowly. It was bizarre, almost as if she was pretending to be a zombie or something. That strange feeling from earlier returned. I remembered trying to open the passenger door, only to find that it was locked from the outside. Sadie stopped outside of the driver's side door and just stared at me through the smudged window. The dark parking lot obscured her features, making her resemble a dark figure. She then waved at me, and I heard her say,
Have a nice trip, David.
Don't ask me how, but I knew exactly what I had to do. I placed my right hand over my throat as a wire fell in front of my face and was pulled tight. There was someone in the back seat. If I didn't bring up my right hand when I did, the wire would have been right on my jugular. I heard the assailant in the back seat grunting as they pulled the wire tighter. As we struggled, Sadie opened the driver's side door. I could see that she was angry at what she saw.
You idiot, you're fucking it up.
A male voice boomed from the back seat.
Move his fucking hand!
Between the creeped out feeling from earlier and the literal attempt on my life, I was 100% sober now. Sadie climbed into the seat and reached for my hand. In all the excitement, she must have not noticed that my left hand was completely free. As soon as she moved in, I clocked her right in the face, sending her backward.
What the fuck? You just hit my girlfriend.
I felt the wire around my throat loosen, and I immediately took the opportunity and threw it off of me, and tried the handle on the passenger side door again. To my surprise, it opened. Before I knew it, I was running down the street as fast as I could. I ended up at a nearby convenience store, where I called the police. I gave them a detailed description of Sadie and the Subaru she was driving. I pretty much spent the rest of that evening giving my statement and answering more questions. I wasn't dropped off at the dorms until after 3 a.m. There have since been a few follow-ups to my case. It was determined that the Subaru was reported stolen earlier that evening. Sadie was clearly a false name, and she used a fake ID at the bar. This was also likely a case of what is known as lust murder. Sadie and her accomplice tried to murder me to fulfill a sadistic sexual desire. This is only a theory, but it does seem to fit. The perpetrators are still at large to this day. I am extremely lucky to be alive right now. If I hadn't raised my hand when I did, I have no doubt that I would have been strangled to death. I'll tell you one thing, that is the last time I'll ever try to pick someone up at a bar.